Harold awoke to the sound of someone knocking on his wooden storm door. He sat up in bed and yawned before looking at the clock. It was 2 a.m. Harold thought he might have imagined it, or maybe a neighbor knocked on the door for some reason, so he lay back down and tried to go back to sleep. But after 30 minutes of tossing and turning with no luck, he got up from bed, put his robe on over his pajamas, and walked downstairs slowly, making sure not to make any noise. He walked around the corner into the living room, where there was a knock coming from outside as if someone was banging something against the storm door. He looked through the front window to see if he could tell who it was, but all he saw was an ominous figure in his yard. So he walked over and opened up the screen door, which creaked loudly as it swung open. The knocking had stopped at this point, and Harold couldn't hear anything from outside now, except for crickets chirping. He stepped out of the house, with fear creeping into him, before finally taking off his robe since there didn't seem like any need for warmth anymore, as the adrenaline in his body seemed to make the chilling night air dissipate. Taking a deep breath, Harold cautiously makes his way down the worn porch steps, moonlight casting ominous shadows all around him. He turns to look back at the house, noticing that there is something wrong, and it dawns on him. The storm door was thrown wide open. Someone has broken in. He quickly looks around for a weapon of some sort, but all he sees are tools for his garden out near the fence line behind his mailbox. The intruder must have gone into the garage, because Harold can hear noises coming from inside now, so he grabs what's available, which was an old rake handle, before running up to stealthily approach the front door. He slows down when nearing the dark doorway, knowing that even a small sound could give away his position, as he saw someone moving about within, throwing shadows onto the walls like devilish puppets. The intruder turns and looks in his direction before he can get into the garage, so Harold quickly steps back behind a tree to avoid being seen. He waits for over 5 minutes until all movement stops inside, and it goes silent. Finally feeling that whoever was there has given up or left, Harold takes a deep breath before stepping out onto the porch with his makeshift weapon raised. Suddenly, an arm comes swinging around from within, grabbing him by the neck, then hurling Harold headfirst into one of his giant flower pots, breaking it upon contact. Before he could think, the attacker mounts Harold from behind and tries to pull him up. Panic setting in, Harold hears a strange muffled noise coming from his attacker, as if trying to communicate with him. Harold was then able to find the strength within him, and with a loud growl, he pushes back, throwing them off his body. Harold quickly turns around only to see his attacker lying on the ground motionless. Panicked and still not sure if this person is really dead or just pretending, Harold runs inside his home, locking all the doors behind him. He grabs a knife he has in his kitchen before turning off all the lights in hopes to lure whoever it was into making themselves visible. And as soon as he turned off the last light, there's another knock coming from outside, like someone hit something against his front door. The knocking got louder until Harold could hear it through 2 closed doors, so that must mean they were right on the opposite side of one. But which? He couldn't see anything because everything was dark, and then suddenly, everything got quiet. Harold could hear his heart beating in his chest, and he wondered to himself, what the hell just happened? The next day, Harold walked out of the house with a baseball bat, only to find an empty street. He walks down every block looking for any sign of who or what it was that tried to get into his home, but there's nothing, so he goes back inside, locking all doors behind him, again, before sitting back on the couch, feeling completely confused and paranoid as ever. A week goes by without another incident until one night there are 2 knocks at once. One coming from outside, like someone hit something against his front door, while another came from upstairs where this time they were louder than usual. Harold starts shaking because now he knows someone is inside the house. Harold looks around frantically, trying to find his phone to call the police. He finally finds it and dials 911. Hello? Hello? Someone is in my house. Harold yells to the operator on the other end of the phone when suddenly he hears a voice coming from upstairs that says, "I'm right here." He hangs up his phone instantly before running upstairs, looking for whoever made that noise, only to find nothing again, like the other times, but still, something about how they laughed sent chills down his spine. Harold isn't a big believer in the supernatural. He's always prided himself at being rational and always having an explanation for things he experiences. So this whole thing must be the result of sleep deprivation, he tells himself. Harold doesn't want to go back downstairs, but knows that if he wants his proof for when the police arrive, he'll have to go get it. He walks slowly downstairs and looks around before heading into the living room, where there's a knock coming from outside, as if someone had hit it against something metal, keeping him out with their hand or foot, which Harold just can't figure how they did without making any noise at all. His mind then drifts off to what could happen next and what would kill him first. Suffocating in an airtight box, or being found dismembered on the couch like one of those people who's been missing for years. Harold doesn't want to end up like that. He snaps out of his daze and runs over to the front door and starts shaking it, trying to get out of the house. Finally, he bursts free and tumbles forward out the door. Harold catches the railings on the stairs so he doesn't fall forward. He looks up and sees about 20 feet in front of him in this front yard, a stuffed bear sitting there, motionless. Harold walks slowly towards it, his heart still beating fast from the fear of being ambushed again, and all alone with no one who can hear him scream. He reaches out to touch it, but before he does, he hears a voice coming from somewhere hidden. "Who are you?" Harold jumps back startled, as if someone had just touched him on the shoulder, startling him. The same voice repeats itself again, this time more softly. "Hey, who are you? Come closer." The voice whispers. Harold realizes that the voice is coming from his storm cellar. He can see that the door was open from where he stood. "Maybe I left it open," he thought to himself, but he realized that ever since the first attack, he was making sure to secure every door to his house, so there's no way he just left it open. Harold glanced back down to go pick up the stuffed bear, but took a step back in disbelief when he sees that the bear has disappeared. He hears an inaudible whisper again, coming from the direction of his storm cellar. "I know you're there, Harold. I'm not going to hurt you." Harold gulped and made his way towards the cellar door with a hesitation in his steps, as if he was walking on broken glass. He reached for one of the wooden boards, creating the frame around it, but before he has time to grab onto them, they give out and start shaking back and forth like someone is trying to make their way out from behind them. He had no choice but to open up the storm cellar and see what was inside. Black. All he could see was pitch black, with a strange deafening silence befalling his ears. He stared into it for what felt like an eternity until finally, by some odd force, Harold descends into the darkness. "Never lock me in again." Shaken, Harold hears these words whispered in his ear and tries to run back up the stairs when suddenly the cellar door slams shut in front of him. He tries to scream, but his screams are stifled by the darkness. Harold was never seen again. A few days later, police are at Harold's property because neighbors reported a bad smell coming from around his house. After knocking on the front door of his house, police are greeted by a man that looks like Harold, but is around 30 years old. He had grown a beard, and his hair is much longer. The man tells the police that he has never heard of Harold before. Police ask the man to come outside to open the cellar door that is locked. Completely confused by what's happening, the man leads them to the old storm door down into the cellar. Without warning, the cellar door slams shut behind them, with only their flashlight penetrating its darkness before it finally plunges into complete silence.